Female prison officers who can't keep their belts fastened while working inside the prison system. There is an epidemic happening inside the system of female prison officers who just love the attention and love canoodling with the male prisoners. Now I'm going to start off by telling you a few stories about when I was inside. Stories from inside the high security prison, because this is where you used to hear about it. I used to hear about this inside the high security prisons, but it wasn't heard of so much in the category C's, maybe it's in the category B's, but not as much as what it is today. Because even in the category C prisons, this is happening a hell of a lot, and it is a lot to do with the private prisons as well. The privately run prisons, a lot to do with the overcrowding and the understaffing. So when I was in HMP Franklin, there was a small amount of prisoners who had had affairs, and back then you could quite understand why they had actually done it and the reason behind it. Because these said prisoners that I'm talking about were multi-millionaires. So obviously the motive behind it for the female prison officers was the glamorous and the amount of money that they had. And when these said prisoners were given these female prison officers a bit of attention, they couldn't believe it. Millionaires were after them. And that is exactly how it started in the high security estate. Because these prisoners that I'm talking about, who were multi-millionaires, drug barons, importers, you name it, they had a name for themselves, and yes, they supplied it, but they weren't the type that took it. They looked after themselves, they went to the gym, and they did look healthy and they looked well. So when you see a healthy looking male who has a lot of pull, who has a lot of money and a lot of respect within the system, and then they give female prison officers a little bit of attention, they fall for it. And sometimes I have actually known cases where they've actually fell in love, the romance. A proper romance story from behind bars, and they've actually fell in love. Some of them have even gotten married. But I'm going to talk about a case where a Colombian national called Pedro, and you guessed it, he was an importer of narcotics, and he had a lot of money behind him. And this young female prison officer who was good looking, I think she was only in her 20s, late 20s, just say maybe he's 30. Pedro was round about the same age, and he struck up a relationship with this prison officer. And I do believe it started either in HMP Whitemore or HMP Long Lawton, and they got found out. He was actually having intercourse with her inside the prison, and she fell pregnant with his baby. Obviously, the authorities got onto it, the prison got onto it, and she was suspended to go and have her baby. But she was actually visiting him up in HMP Franklin, and on one of the days we were on a visit, our families were in visiting us, and it was at the end of the visit, Pedro was two down from where I was sitting with his girlfriend, the ex-screw, and their little baby that they just had. And guess what happened at the end of the visit? Luckily, most of our visitors had left, because I do think a lot of people would have been upset if their kids had actually seen this, because there was kids visiting on this day. So Pedro had said to his girlfriend, the ex-screw, bend over. So she bent over. She had a tiny little mini skirt on with no knickknacks underneath. She bent over, picked the bottle up to give it to the baby. Pedro whipped out his sausage and inserted into the female, well, I was going to say a prison officer, into his girlfriend on the visit. A couple of the lads did turn around, see what was going on, went a bit blushed and thought, what the fuck's going on here? A couple of them started chuckling away when my pal said to me, look at that. We turned round, obviously you couldn't see anything because our little tiny mini skirt was covering everything. But he was having himself a jolly good time. It didn't stop him doing it on the prison wing, and it's not stopped him doing it in the visits room. But like I say, he did wait till the end of the visit, and most people's family members had gone. But the lad sitting next to me had his kids up on the visit, and luckily they had just left. So that was the case of that, and the reason why she'd done that was money. He was supporting her financially. Obviously, he's a millionaire, he's from Colombia, and he's given her more than just his man bits. He was giving her plenty of money as well, and that was the reason why she fell for him as well. But like I've said, there was a couple of more cases in there where prisoners who, like I've said, there were lads that looked after themselves, they had a lot of money, and that was the reason why they fell for them at the time. But go down the system and go on in the years, to go fast forward 10, 15, now 20 years, and the dynamics have changed inside the prison estate. These prison officers were trained. They used to have to do at least a 6-month training, I believe it was, and they would be, a lot of them were staunch prison officers, especially back in HMP Durham. The female prison officers were absolute dogs, the majority of them. They didn't take any shit, and you definitely wouldn't be getting a bit off them. Plus, half of them were manly looking, quite strapping, looked like ex-army, and they were quite buff. And like I say, they treat the prisoners like crap, and they sported them like crap. So you weren't getting any nookie inside the Durham. But now, those type of prison officers are gone. Prison officers, they're recruiting prison officers. Some of them that used to work in the likes of McDonald's, and they've been offered a better job, better pay than McDonald's, maybe it's an extra 10p an hour. And they've said, come and work for the prison system, earn yourself a better wage, not much, because they were still on absolute shite wages inside the system. And this is where they were getting manipulated, because more so, like I've said, in the private prisons, because in the private prisons, they're not run as thorough as the normal prisons. And these are the ones that just brought staff in from anywhere, from any background, that weren't properly trained. And imagine someone, a prison officer, 22-year-old, that goes out partying on a weekend, blasts all her money, she's got nothing left, like most people that age, most young'uns that age that aren't very sensible with money. They just live for the weekend, get plastered all weekend, and come Monday, they've got no money. They're in prison, doing a shit mundane job, moping around. The prisoners are looking at them thinking, I think I know what's the matter with her. She hasn't got much money. So, slowly they build up relationships, and then they say, what's the matter, pet? Well, that's what they say up in the northeast. What's the matter, pet? Or down in Nottingham, they might say, what's the matter, ducky? Or wherever else, they'll say, what's the matter, babe? Are you had a rough weekend? Have you got no money? Something like that. And then they'll say, well, and then they start working the way and say, well, what would you do if you had an extra £500 a week? And then they would say, well, how the hell am I supposed to earn an extra £500 a week? I can't even get any overtime. Well, pet, I've got just the thing for you. Bring us a mobile in and I'll give you 500 quid. £500. Give you a monkey. So that's where it starts. Then, when these female prison officers start seeing a bit more money and they're getting more gifts, then they start falling for the prisoners rather, And guess what? Then they start undoing their belts, dropping the drawers, and getting a score. So that is exactly how it happens. But like I've just said, I'm going to tell you a few different stories now. But like I've just said, that's how it's happening. The dynamics have changed, and these prison officers aren't properly trained. They're coming from any background, and that is exactly what is happening. But the one I'm going to talk about first is in HMP Wandsworth. I mentioned it on a video I done last week. If you haven't seen it, go and have a look. I talk about the inside of HMP Wandsworth and the shit state that it's in at the moment. So Linda D'Souza Abreu, who's 30-year-old, a lot of people would have seen this video. This happened in 2024, but she was sentenced on the 6th of January 2025 to 15 months. But Linda was getting a good old stiff one inside of a pad of one of the inmates. He was giving her a good saying to. She was absolutely loving it. And the pad mate was sat there on his bunk bed filming the whole lot. I don't know what he was doing with his other hand whilst he was filming with his right hand or left hand. I'm not sure exactly which hand it was, but one of his hands was free, and we do not know what he was doing with that one, do we? So, leave that to your imagination. But yes, Linda was getting rogered inside of the pad, off her prisoner, sorry. And the other prisoner, I started circulating the video and it went viral. I did do videos on it at the time, and I was saying that because she had a social media platform, I thought she'd actually done this as a bit of a publicity stunt for her OnlyFans, because she would have made an absolute killing afterwards. She probably is now, to be honest, making an absolute killing off that, because, like I say, I think it seemed at the time like a publicity stunt. But yes, she got convicted for misconduct in a public office by abusing her position as a prison officer to have an intimate see-and-to with a prisoner, and she was sentenced to 15 months inside of prison. But this next one that I'm going to speak about was actually a prison governor. And you never ever hear about these type of stories up until this one, where a prison governor had actually had an intimate relationship with a prisoner, and she was actually getting gifts from him, and she was taking all sorts into the prison. Now he must have used his charm and manipulated her to the highest level. So Kerry Pegg, ex-governor of HMP Kirkham, got convicted, and Kerry Pegg was sentenced to 9 years inside of prison for misconduct in a public office after she entered into an inappropriate relationship with a convicted drug boss. So the drug boss in question was Anthony Saunderson, serving 35 years after being convicted of drug trafficking. And it does say he was previously one of Merseyside's most wanted criminals over his part in a plot to import 19 mil of coke in shipments of corned beef from Argentina. So Kerry Pegg, started having an intimate relationship with him, and that is her fall from grace, because that intimate relationship cost her not only her job, but also 9 years inside of prison. And that is one of the cases where, like I've just said, it's not very often you hear of a governor doing this type of deeds. So, 2 seconds while I get that up. It says Pegg's case is the latest in a string of convictions of corrupt prison officers, several of whom who have entered into inappropriate relationships with inmates. So that is exactly how that one went down. And like I say, he's doing a big old stretch. He would have tried everything to get into the governor, and that would have been the ultimate score for him. Guess what, lads? I've bagged the governor. But yes, that's one of the ones that when I did, because I did actually cover this one at the time as well, and it was one of them cases where I thought, a prison governor. The governors are normally the ones that's investigating the prison officers that are doing these type of deeds. But I thought I would bring you them stories because at the moment, there's a lot of news articles. I mean, there's a whole load more. Nearly every day when I'm coming on to do stories, I'm searching up stories, and nearly every day there's different stories about female prison officers getting into relationships with prisoners. And the reason being is because, like I've just said, the majority of them, apart from the likes of a governor, the majority of them have come from poor wages or poor jobs, shitty jobs, went into the prison system without much training. They are getting manipulated. They are getting offered bribes. And not just that, what I did forget to mention, a lot of these prison officers, some of them aren't very good looking. They don't get a lot of attention in the outside world. Every dog in the prison wants a piece of the new female on the wing. So that is exactly what happens. They get loads of attention from all the lads inside the nick, and they absolutely love it. They walk out them gates with their head held high instead of the heads drooped thinking, wow, what a harsh shift. They walk out thinking, yes, I'm fucking the bee's knees. I'm a beauty queen. And then she gets back into reality outside and she doesn't get any attention. She can't wait to get back to work the next day to get more attention from the cons. And that is another reason why they take off their belts and drop their drawers. But I'm going to leave that one there for now, people. But like I say, I'm just bringing you this because the UK prison system is in an absolute shit state at the moment. It's in crisis. It's overcrowded, understaffed, and it has went to the absolute dogs. But people, I'm going to leave that one there for now. Hopefully you are still enjoying the content. And if you are, you know the drill. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.